Did you know that your life is your story? Very many people out there are waiting to listen to your story because it is what you have, it is the weapon you have, it is the gospel you have to preach to those who are brokenhearted, to those who are hopeless, to those who are disillusioned. Therefore, your story is very important. That is why Family TV gave in this time to motivate you, to encourage you, to give you a new meaning of life. This is my story, and it is only on Family TV every single Sunday at exactly 7 p.m. So you shouldn't miss any single Sunday. Erin Austin Mukalazi is my name. And you who missed last week, let us just give you a glimpse of what our guest gave us. And then, of course, after that, we are going to continue.
Well, my parents were pastors in the church of Uganda. And so I was born in a place called Wancherere in Kabale district, then called Kigezi district in colonial days. And I went to school. I believe I remember fighting with my father when he said I should go to school, and I picked up a stone. I wanted to stone him, but when he stood up, I feared to stone him, and I obeyed.
Stoning him because he's sending you to school?
Yes. So I obeyed and went to school, and the first day the teacher looked at me, he said, "Tam tambo tamaro." It means this one is worthless.
That was a short recap of what Professor Ezra Suruma shared with us, and we have him today. Professor, you're most welcome to today's My Story. We are glad that you've given us another opportunity to share with us your story.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Kindly greet our esteemed viewers.
Greetings, esteemed viewers.
We are indeed delighted that we have Professor back. Professor, I have a friend of mine called Emma in Wakiso. He told me if he was in your school, the school you studied from, he would have filled thousands and thousands of the red pages. But of course, he wasn't there. That is how he missed it out. But of course, Professor, last week, as we winded, you told us about your journey to the exile. What exactly had happened that made you go to exile?
What happened was that Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who was heading the Uganda Patriotic Movement, of which Joshua Mjenye and I had been elected for me as Secretary of Economic Affairs, and Joshua, I was a Deputy Secretary General. We, having lost the election, were attacked, or rather, the army came for us at Makerere, and this was following Museveni's attack on Kabamba barracks. And so we, having been part of the executive of Uganda Patriotic Movement, I believe we are considered to be collaborators in what he was doing. And so they came to arrest us, or kill us, I don't know which. But by the grace of God, we escaped, and I went to Kenya, and from there I went to Germany, and from Germany I went to America.
How long were you in Kenya, how long were you in Germany, and how long were you in America, and why you chose those countries?
Well, it was not a matter of choice. You went where you could, because we were running away from here. Actually, I passed through Rwanda, and I managed to get to Nairobi, and from Nairobi I was able to get to Germany. I had a fellowship offered while I was still at Makerere, and they honored their word. I spent 3 months there, and after that I was able to go to the United States, and I was able to find a job as a teacher, as a professor at Coppin State College in the city of Baltimore in the state of Maryland, which is next to Washington, D.C. And yes, started teaching in August 81 and continued until 1985
So, Professor, those are close to 6 years.
Yes.
And in all this whole exile journey, were you married all?
No, I was by myself. I had been married long before, from 69 to 75. But in 73, when I came back to Makerere, my American wife said I had deserted her and she divorced me. We had one son who is still alive and living in America. And all these other years, I remained single until 1992.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how long you are after America? Did you continue some other country or you had to come back home?
After America, well, while I was in America, there was a takeover of government from Obote by Tito Okello in 1985. And then, for the first time, my relative said I could come home. So I came to visit in December 85 for a short time. I came through Rwanda because NRM had taken over the West, so it was possible to come in. I came.
Is it what the president told us of recent in one of his addresses, that he had taken off the other part from Katonga?
That's correct. So I was able to come in and see my relatives. After a few weeks, I went back to America and continued teaching until in summer, during the summer holidays, which is June to August, I came back to visit and met many people. But still, I didn't have a job here, so I went back to my job in the USA, where I was a full professor, permanent and pensionable. I was getting a good salary. I was also studying for a master's in computer science at Columbia University, so I had my plate was full. But in later that year, when Honorable Chionga was made Minister of Finance, he called me and asked if I could come back and join the central bank.
Is Chionga made Minister of Finance during Tito's government regime?
No. When NRM had taken over. NRM took over in January 86. Tito's regime lasted only 6 months. So NRM took over in January 86. That's why I was able to come in June of that year and stay for 2 months. And then, so they called me, and I talked to my college in America. They said, if you can find someone to replace you, you can go, which I did. And so I joined. I came in February 87.
When this time you're free?
Yes, this time I was free. And I joined the central bank as Director of Research.
So how long did you serve as Director of Research in the central bank?
I served as Director of Research until 1990. In May 1990, I was in Madagascar doing work on coffee. We were under pressure to liberalize coffee marketing, because until then, coffee exports were a monopoly of Coffee Marketing Board, and it was the only source of revenue for government. So when they put pressure on us, that by them I mean the World Bank and IMF, to liberalize the export of coffee, the government was not sure. They sent me and a team. I headed a team which went to Colombia, to Costa Rica, to France, to UK, to Madagascar, to find out how they were doing their management of exports. And during that time, when we were in Madagascar, and the government of Madagascar was in the process of being overthrown, a coup was in progress while we were there. Tear gas was finding us in the hotel. I got news that I had been promoted to Deputy Governor. So I went out as Director of Research.
You came back as Deputy
Governor.
Wow. And then how long did you serve as Deputy Governor?
3 years, 90, 91, 92. In 93, I moved to Uganda Commercial Bank.
How do you go to Uganda Commercial Bank? Were you still promoted?
No. It was a request that I made because I was heading the financial sector team to reform the financial sector. By the financial sector, I mean basically banking sector. And there were many problems. One of the major problems we faced was the Uganda Commercial Bank being the biggest bank owned by the government, totally 100% owned by Uganda government. And now we're under pressure that should be privatized. And I opposed that. I thought that the Ugandans should continue to own that bank because during the colonial days, Ugandans had virtually no access to banks.
Was it the only bank in Uganda at that time?
There was also a cooperative bank, which was also doing poorly and actually ended up being closed. So our presence of Ugandans in the financial sector was negligible without Uganda Commercial Bank. Uganda Commercial Bank held close to half the deposits of the whole country. So it was a very important institution, and I thought we should retain its ownership and control, and that's why I went to Uganda Commercial Bank.
In other words, your intention of joining Uganda Commercial Bank was to stop the attempt of privatizing it?
That's correct. The Minister of Finance, Honorable Mayanja Nkanji, called me, said, Musao, why are you going to
why did he call you Musao?
Doctor.
Oh.
That was how he used to call me. He was affectionate. We were good friends. He said, why don't you stay where you are? You'll become governor later. I said, no, let me go and see what I can do to save this bank. And it was very difficult work. It was even dangerous work because we had to dismiss very many, more than 1,000 people had to be dismissed. Many branches had to be closed because we didn't have money to run them. The bank had been expanded quickly in terms of branches, but the government had not put in capital to meet the cost of expansion.
But then, Professor, what did you think of the fate of these thousands of people that were losing their jobs?
Well, if everything has a cost, by saving the bank, we would create many more jobs, infinitely more jobs, by financing businesses than we would lose through closing the branches. Besides, once the bank became profitable, then we would open more branches later on when we could afford to do so, or by getting more capital from the government, which at that time was not feasible.
Did you achieve it eventually?
No.
Why?
I achieved profitability, but to my consternation and deep disappointment, when I told the World Bank that the bank was now profitable, they said now it will fetch a better price.
Their interest was still in privatizing it?
In privatizing it. So I don't think they were, in the first place, they have not been honest about why they wanted it privatized. I don't think that was because of profitability. I think they had other reasons.
But maybe we would like to understand, Professor, didn't you people have the authority of either accepting or dismissing their request?
I didn't. The government had to decide what to do. We were under pressure. We didn't have money. So what was happening was what we call conditionalities. The World Bank or IMF would lend you some money but under certain conditions. There are certain conditionalities or conditions you have to do as a result of accepting that money. One of the conditionalities was that we would privatize that bank. And I tried to argue that we should not accept that conditionality, but I lost.
So was it privatized when you were still the managing director?
No, I was dismissed. In 1996, I was dismissed, and I left and went to Kabale to look after. I had a timber sawmill and some buses. I went and started running those businesses. And then after some time, the president called me and said he would like me to join the National Resistance Movement Secretariat as Director of Economic Affairs, which I did, and I stayed in that position for 8 years until 2005, when I was made Minister of Finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, after being dismissed from the managing
Uganda
director post, you go back to Kabale. You're now called back to the secretariat, NRM secretariat, and now you're becoming a minister. How did you feel about your life, seeing this progress in your life? That even when things seem to be breaking, at least there is something that joins in immediately.
Many people felt sorry for me.
When you lost the job?
When I was dismissed, of course. And when they saw me in the NRM secretariat, they felt sorry for me. They thought that was for losers, as it were. I was happy to serve and to do what I could for the country, especially in articulating the correct, or what should be the economic ideology of Uganda. Things were not simple. I came up with some ideas and models that some were rejected, some were accepted, and some are still underway. So it was a time of reflection, but I think in life you have ups and downs. I must confess that I never felt sorry for myself. I felt that as long as I was here and was doing what I could for my country, that was good enough. And that's what I did.
So, Professor, how long did you serve as the Minister of Finance?
4 years, 2005 until 2009.
And you were dismissed again?
I don't know if I was dismissed. They didn't say I was dismissed. There was a change. I was changed to become Senior Presidential Advisor, which was fine.
Of the two posts, the Minister of Finance and the Senior Presidential Advisor, which weighs heavier than the other?
Certainly Minister of Finance, no doubt. It's a much more active responsibility and a very difficult responsibility. Very, very heavy. I didn't realize how heavy it was until I got there. But of course, I never expected to go there. It came as a total surprise to go to Minister of Finance. So, as a Senior Presidential Advisor, I didn't have to have a daily chores. I had more free time to myself, and so I could do some of my own things. I could write, and very soon I was privileged to have an appointment as a distinguished visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. So I asked Honorable Nsubambi, then Prime Minister, to allow me to go. He did. So I went there, and it's a leading think tank in the world. So it was a privilege to be there. I was able to write a book on Uganda's economy, which I think I would recommend to my readers to read. It's Advancing the Ugandan Economy. I'm hoping to get a second edition very soon.
In which year did you write that first edition?
It came out in 2014. And by then I had come back and resumed my work as a presidential advisor. And 2 years later, 1 year later, 2015, I was Honorable Gunda asked me if I could head a delivery unit, service delivery unit in the office of the Prime Minister. This was now a more active work.
Had you resigned from being a senior presidential advisor, or you were taking the two responsibilities?
I was taking two responsibilities. This one was now a day-to-day, more involved affair. I'm still doing it. Very heavy work, trying to see how priorities of government could be implemented, because many policies are passed, but many of them are not implemented.
And that is why that is a question we ask ourselves. Why is it that very many policies are passed, but a few are implemented?
Because implementation is very difficult. Implementation requires focus, it requires commitment, it requires setting targets, it requires continuous monitoring, it requires coordination of many sectors. So it's actually more complicated than we think.
So should we conclude that the would-be implementers lack those qualities we just talked about?
I think so. I think that when policies are made, it's usually not so easy, not clear how they are going to be implemented, and the complexities of implementation, and also the resources, the funds for implementation. So it's important to prioritize, select a few areas that are of greatest importance to the people and focus on those. Otherwise, if you try to make everything a priority, then nothing is a priority.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you've said you worked up to 2015 as the presidential advisor.
I continue to be presidential advisor. Now we are focusing on increasing coffee production, for example, in Prime Minister's Delivery Unit. We are focusing on reducing absenteeism in primary schools, because we found that literacy levels for pupils after 6 years of primary school, the literacy rate of passing was only half. Only half the pupils were passing literacy, reading and writing. And numeracy, maybe 70% were passing. So we wondered why. How do you finish 6 years of school and you can't read and write? And we found there are many causes, but one of them is a high level of absenteeism by teachers, about 40% at the time when we did the research. So 40% of the time teachers would not be there in class. And so we were trying to find, we started with 20 districts in the east. They were the lowest performing districts, and tried to put in place mechanisms for ensuring that they're in class every day. And similarly for health workers in the same districts.
So, Professor, according to your current report, do you see these challenges being attended to? Do you see the numbers falling?
Yes, there have been a significant drop in absenteeism in those areas where we're active. We had brought the figures up to 95%. That's in the 20 districts, what we call pilot districts. So the idea was that if the program worked in those 20 districts, then we'd roll it out to the rest of the country. And this involves tracking everybody's attendance daily.
Professor, at that very moment, I want us to go for a short commercial break. But when we come back, I have a burning question on that very aspect you've just mentioned.
As you think about the Lord just taking over your case and you are no longer in the midst of it, and he says, fear not.
Demons from the mountains, scream and leave. Demons from the graves, scream and leave in the name of Jesus.
Welcome back from the commercial break. This is my story. This program is only on Family TV, and you who would wish to follow us, of course, you can follow us via our YouTube channel, that is Family TV Uganda, or Facebook page, Family TV Uganda, but you can as well download our Family TV app on your App Store or Google Play Store. Professor, before we went, you had talked about something to do with supervising. But we realized that government, especially government institutions, like you talked about the schools and health facilities, lack supervision. And you realize that very many of the beneficiaries are not attended to. What do you have to say about that, since you're in that very department?
Well, what we have attempted to do is to work with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of Public Service, to coordinate the work of the schools and hospitals so that there is more monitoring. In other words, there's more record keeping and there is follow-up. We are checking on the headmaster, we are checking on the in charge of the hospital to make sure that the records of those who are present are sent. And in some cases, in hospitals, for example, we have introduced biometric equipment which require the workers to indicate, to indicate biometrically when they came in and when they left. We have not yet figured out how to make sure that when they report, they stay. Because they report that they came.
Because that is now another challenge.
Yes, another
and then
challenge.
have you set penalties for those you realize are continuing to
Yes,
absent themselves?
we send feedback to the districts, human resource committees of who worked when and who didn't work, when they didn't work, and expect a report on what action they have taken. And indeed, we have found that the districts are now being more responsive. They are taking up the responsibility. They've been challenged, and it is in everybody's interest that children learn. It's in everybody's interest that patients find someone to look after them when they report to the hospital. So it's not as if we are bringing a burden, an extra burden. We are simply saying, if you are being paid, please work.
But in actual sense, would someone be reminded of their responsibility as a government worker that you're supposed to work?
It's not a question of reminding, it's a question of requiring. If you are receiving payment from the taxpayer, then you must provide the services which you have contracted to provide.
No, because someone takes it for granted. That is why you've come in to remind them.
Yeah, so yes, it's that when you don't monitor, when you don't know what's going on, some people will take advantage. And it's not something new if you've been to these other so-called advanced countries. Try, putting your thumb on the machine or some record of when you came in and left and so on is part of the ordinary way of doing business.
In other words, it is not something so special.
No. We're simply finding that by not having these mechanisms, our people are not getting the service they deserve and which they pay for through their taxes.
So, Professor, very many people out there have known you as the Chancellor of Makerere University. When do you become, or when were you appointed the Chancellor of Makerere?
2016.
While you are still the presidential advisor, or you had now left that office?
Still presidential advisor, still Prime Minister's delivery unit. But what you need to know about the Chancellor of Makerere University, it's like a Queen of England. You don't really participate in the management or work of the university. You basically come for ceremonies. It's a ceremonial post, which used to be done by the president in the past, but it is time-consuming during the graduation. For example, in Makerere, we have 4 full days, Monday to Thursday, from 9 to 3 or 4 or 5.
And very soon you're conducting another...
Yes, in May. So for a head of state to sit from 9 to 4 every day for 4 days is not practical, it's not possible. It's much too busy for that. So I think they found, in the new act, they found a way out of that by creating a chancellor. And it's basically a ceremonial, for ceremonies, appointments. I sign letters of appointment for the vice chancellor and the top administrators of the university. And that's about it. I don't get myself involved in the day-to-day management of the university.
Okay. So is it still the president who appoints you, or there is a special committee that appoints?
There is a committee which recommends to the president, and the president signs the appointment letter, but on the recommendation of a committee of the university.
So what are the qualities?
I don't know.
So you want to mean that anyone can be recommended?
I think anyone can apply. Why not?
You first apply.
They call for. I think they invite. Yes, they invite people to express interest. Maybe that's more a better way of saying than application. Exactly. Expression of interest, and when they call for expression of interest, then there's hardly any salary. It's maybe they give you allowance or something, but it's not a job. It's something you do for the university, for your country. In my case, of course, having taught at Makerere in 73 to 75 and 79 to 81, so at least I have some relationship with the university, although that's not a requirement, but it's ideal. And yeah, and I identify fully with the work of the university, with the work of teaching. Most of my life until I joined the government, I was a teacher, a professor, and so it's very much in line with my background and my motivation.
So, Professor, you've told us a lot, and we have seen a lot of success in your journey, in all the places, in all the offices you've served. here and outside Uganda. But in all this, have you ever reached a time and you feel like you're over pressed and you feel like giving up?
In 1985, I was in New York studying at Columbia University to get a master's in computing and education. And I had gone, this was in June, I believe, June or July. I'd gone to a restaurant to have lunch, and a couple came in, a young man and lady, and I looked at them and I felt deeply lonely and lost. And I left. I was so, somehow it hit me that something was wrong with me. And as I left the restaurant...
Had you decided to remain single for the rest of your life after the other divorce?
Yes. I don't know about the rest of my life, but I had no inclination to get married. This is now in 1985. I was about 40 years old. And I was crossing Broadway, which is a major street in New York, from the restaurant back to campus at Columbia. And as I stood in the middle of the road, I felt a very heavy weight on my shoulders, more than I could carry, like carrying a grinding stone. And I didn't know what had happened. And suddenly I decided that I had to come home. And I had spent enough. You know what you don't realize, being in exile, you are away from all your family, all the people you love, or your brothers, or your sisters, or your parents. You have not seen them for 6 years. And I think after a while it gets to you. So, as I made a decision that I would come back, I went to in the evening, I went to a common room, and there was a Kenyan man. He said, "Something has happened in your country." I ignored him. I didn't want to hear any rumors or false hopes. But the following day, when I read the New York Times, where Uganda was on the front page, our government had been overthrown by Tito Okello, and I knew then I could come back. So yes, I had reached a point where I couldn't take exile any longer. But as God would have it, that coincided with the time when I could come back. Yeah.
Professor, you told us in the previous episode that you had given your life to Christ at an early age. Was it 16 or 15?
1960.
No, the age. How old were you?
15, yeah.
15 years. Yeah. And as you grew up, you encountered a lot of things. You're in politics, you're in the government. You served in the most challenging government offices. For example, when you served as the Minister of Finance, because people out there think that this is the most unfair ministry, because it is the ministry that plans the taxes to be imposed on people. And as a Christian, how did you feel and how did you manage to work in such offices but remain with the banner of Jesus Christ up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, when you trust God, God helps you. And in the Ministry of Finance, I was not afraid to express my convictions about what I believed was right. And this didn't always go well with everyone. Many people found me too hard too uncaring, I think, to if you have a certain interest and someone says no, you may feel that they don't like you or they don't care, but that's not the issue. The issue is it right or is it not right? Is it the right use of money for the country or is it not? So I think God helped me to do what I considered to be right. I was attacked many times for that, but God rescued me every time. And perhaps the most memorable problem was what's called Temangalo, when your NSSF bought land, and I had to sign approving that purchase along with many other purchases. But because some of my friends we owned a bank called National Bank of Commerce, which we had started in Kigezi as Kigezi Bank of Commerce, and then was later changed to National Bank of Commerce. And some of my colleagues were selling land in order to buy shares in that bank, so they thought I was favoring them. And they brought the matter to Parliament and went to Special Commission and so on. But I think in the end, everybody realized I was not a beneficiary at all. And they even, some attempted to frame me. They have a small school here and they forged documents show that my wife had received 410 million shillings. Unfortunately, they forged it very poorly because the check on which they wrote the check on which they wrote was not in existence at the time of Temangaro. So, having been a banker, when I looked at it, I was able to tell quickly that it was a forgery. And I alerted everybody, so that fell by the wayside. That's some of the little ways in which God protects some of us. So, yes, God stands by his people. And this doesn't mean we don't suffer. Doesn't mean we don't meet challenges. We do. We suffer. But I think in the end, what I have come to learn, I've been studying the book of Genesis recently, is that God's purpose will be fulfilled in your life and everybody else's life. So if you're meeting difficulties, life seems unbearable, take heart. God knows your fate. God knows your future. And he'll make sure that that future is fulfilled. No one can change your fate except God.
Professor, each time we see you talk, at least you mentioned something to do with how someone can be financially successful like you are, because you have invested in very many projects and they are succeeding, they are moving on, they are not collapsing. So what tips can you give us as the youths, or even those who are not youths but are watching you at this time and they are struggling to become wealthy?
Well, I don't consider myself a wealthy man, and I've never wanted to be a wealthy man. I have mainly attempted to do the best wherever I have found myself, to do the best for God. And I believe very strongly in Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to I think 46 or 42, where God is asking you, what did you do for the naked people that you saw? What did you do for the hungry people that you saw? What did you do for the sick people that you saw who were near you? And I believe, in my advice to everyone, especially my fellow Ugandans, is can you do something to help others? I'm an economist by profession. And in economics, the most elementary lesson we learn concerns supply and demand as the source of value. When you produce something and there is a need for it, a demand for it, people are willing to, or a need of what you're producing, then it has value. But it takes two parts, the one who supplies and one who buys. So the people think of money, 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 money. Money is just paper. I used to head a committee in the central bank that was printing money. And whether you are printing 1 shilling or printing 1,000, the cost is the same because it's just paper. It's not value. Value is what are you producing, and does anybody need what you're producing? So when you start off by wanting wealth, not by wishing to satisfy a need that you see around you, I think that you have a very difficult time. Some will make it, no doubt, by hook or crook, but I believe that fundamentally as a country and as a world, we move forward by meeting needs, by seeing the gifts that God has given us. Can I use these gifts? When I say gifts, I don't mean that you are talented beyond everybody else, that you should be proud. No. If I have strength, if I have breath, if I have eyes and I can see, if I can talk, all these are gifts, because I don't talk on my own. God gives me the ability to talk. I don't see on my own. And if I had to buy this, the ability to talk or the ability to see, I wouldn't find enough money. So that's why we are the gifts, because they are freely given by God. So what are you using them to do? First of all, recognize that these are gifts. Your strength, your breath, where you find yourself in time and space. Maybe you're in Kampala, maybe you're in Kapshorwa. That's where God has put you. And those are the neighbors God has given you. Now, what can you do for these people? Is it a school? Is it some kind of product that you can produce on the land? Is it a service? Is it water? Now, the strongest paradox I find in Uganda and in Africa and other countries is when you are so poor and yet you say there is no employment. This is a paradox. You are in great need and you are not able to work. What's the problem? What is missing? You cannot say in Uganda that we don't have resources. We do. So why are we poor? Something is fundamentally wrong. But because we want to start with money, rather than starting with service, with what can I do, however small, for someone. And as you start with that mentality, God will build you. You'll find that you don't know the paths of the future, but God does. And you need to take a step of faith and do what you can and trust God to lead you to where you need to go. I have never designed the course of my life, as I said last time. I find God sending me here, sending me there. I find myself doing this or doing that. Not because, in fact, all the ideas I had of my own. I had a sawmill, I had a bus line. All these things collapsed. They were my ideas.
Professor,
but God's ideas will never collapse.
Indeed. So, as a proprietor of a secondary school, I would ask, are you happy with the way the education system has been commercialized, that today people don't build? Because last time you told us that you constructed this school basically to help the needy. And today people construct schools to earn profits and not to help people. That is why we hear reports that students have been stopped from sitting for their final exams because they've not cleared school fees. Are you happy with the commercialization of the education system?
That's a difficult question. I don't want to pass judgment.
In your opinion?
I think that we have a big challenge in Uganda to improve our education system so that it focuses on the quality of character of children rather than on passing exams. The passing exams, we have now literally millions of children who have passed exams and are not employed because we've been focusing too much on exams and so on. And we need to realize that that's not where the future is. The future is on the quality of the person that is coming out of school, his moral integrity, his character, his willingness to serve, his humility, not his desire for wealth. That is putting the cart before the horse, as they say.
When you ask young children out there, why do you study? I study to be rich.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But also the content of our syllabus needs to change because I think now creativity is far more important. And creativity comes out of recognizing what is it that people need. You are living in an area where there's no clean water. But instead of attempting to find how to improve that water or transport it to the people, you are also part of the problem. And you say you are educated. The content of education is useless. You can't even drink clean water and you say you are being educated. What education is that?
You can't even construct a traditional rank.
No, it's very unfortunate. So we have to look at the content of our character, as I say, and the content of education in terms of creativity, and reorganize our economy, of course, so that there is more assurance that even the disabled, even those who are not so bright in school, that everyone has a contract with society so that they will have a standard of living that is fair and not becoming a subhuman, as my German friend said. When I went there to study social security, they said we try to make sure that no German citizen lives in a subhuman state. That means that every citizen has a contract with his country to live in a fair condition.
You've talked about a subhuman way. What is your say on the ongoing insecurity in Uganda today, where people are abducted, kidnapped, and very many families don't know where their relatives are? Of course, the military is saying they don't have them, so they don't know where they are. We too don't know where they are, but we just see reports of people being kidnapped.
When far back we were forming, when I entered politics, it was precisely because Uganda was falling apart. And we wanted to find a way for people to live together rather than everyone following their religion or their tribe and pulling away. Now, my message to my fellow Ugandans is that although we were colonized and put together as a country by the colonists, still we were neighbors even before they came. The Acholi, the Baganda, the Banyoro, the Karamajong, we were in this area as neighbors. And now the colonists, at least on paper, they have left, but we are still neighbors. Can't we find a way of living together as neighbors rather than being at war with each other? So for me, I would like to go back and say we have always been neighbors. God has put us here. Let us find a way of coexisting in peace as neighbors. You don't want to be fighting with your neighbor every day. It's not good. So whether as tribes or as religions, we are God. This is where God has put us, and it is up to us as the people of this area to find a way to coexist. And I hope that any attitude, any action which fights and creates conflict is wrong, and we should go away from that attitude to one of finding how we can live together peacefully.
Wow. Thank you so much, Professor. We are indeed glad that you shared with us a lot of this information. You've advised us, you've encouraged us, and you've also opened our eyes, of course, to some of the things that maybe we underlooked. We thank you so much. But above all, we thank you for accepting to share with us your story. It is indeed a unique story. Very many people out there didn't know this, and very many people had not gotten a chance to hear you speak this information, besides the speech you give during graduation at Makere. But we are glad that you've shared with us this story. Thank you so much, you who started with us last week up to today. We really thank you so much. Thank you for sparing your time to watch Family TV. We are indeed grateful, because it is you that keeps us moving. Because of you, we come up with these people. And this is my story. You who has just joined in, remember to watch a recap of this program on Wednesday at exactly 7 p.m. So you shouldn't miss. Inform your friend, your neighbor, your brother, your sister to watch, because these words are really so important to all of us. Thank you so much. Once again, Edwin Austin Mkalas is my name. I've worked with Jonah Jal, the producer, Tony Santo on social media, and Bantam in transmission. Have a good night, and may God bless you.